Welcome to Evolve, Reinventing Leadership, Building Freedom Cultures, with CEO and award-winning author, Yvette Bethel. This podcast is dedicated to providing leaders with solutions to build trust, inspire authentic transformation, and improve engagement. Learn about new and tested ways you can revitalize your culture, empower people, and transform your results.
Hi, this is Yvette Bethel, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the Evolve podcast. Evolve challenges traditional leadership topics, explores modern leadership models, providing ideas you can use to transform your culture. We focus on leadership through the lens of interconnectivity, flow, and balance, and we explore ideas that translate into practical applications for contemporary organizational challenges. The topic for this episode of Evolve is breaking down barriers to change. And to explore this topic with us is Professor of Business, EQ Facilitator, and Mentor, Ajene Wilcoxson. Now, Ajene is not only a professor of business, he is a student of Logotherapy and a certified 6 seconds emotional intelligence facilitator and assessor and practitioner. He focuses on helping his students and clients to develop an EQ mindset and facilitates inspirational talks, workshops as a consultant, but most importantly, he is a teacher from the perspective of being a guide, a helper, and mentor in the life learning process. His passion and foundation are living and teaching how to experience a soul-centered, emotionally intelligent life. Ajené is the recipient of the Dr. John W. Rice Diversity and Equity Award, the Dr. Regina Stanback-Stroud Diversity Award, and the ACBSP National Teaching Excellence Award. So hello, Ajené, and welcome to Evolve.
Thank you, Yvette. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much. That was a nice introduction.
You sent it to me.
You love it.
It is great to have you. Now, we just heard a little bit about your background. So please help our audience to understand how you became interested in breaking down barriers to change and which barriers fascinate you the most.
That's a great question. Barriers. I see barriers in many perspectives, Yvette. Barriers in communication, barriers in cultures, barriers in relationships. And so I'm always thinking about ways to overcome those barriers, to jump over those hurdles, to better myself in relationships and help others better themselves.
So what fascinates you the most about barriers or breaking down barriers? Because I don't think the barriers themselves are fascinating.
No, and that's interesting you say that. I'm struggling now with the word breaking down barriers, and it's easier for me to process just building up change. Barriers, when I say that to people, I can see a change in who they are. The wall, the face changes, which represents the wall, their eyes change, as opposed to me saying, let's talk about this to build up. And that leans them into the conversation a little bit more, particularly in challenging areas as it relates to those topics that are real prevalent today. Diversity, equity, those type of words. And I'm trying to get away from that because, as we've talked about in the past, it naturally causes people to think in the opposite direction of where you may want to go.
So from your perspective, what does it mean to break them down? What is that?
So when I think of change, I think of resistance, which is natural. I think it's part of humanity or human nature to be resistant to change. I think of it can be traumatic, but then I also think of it as being liberating, freeing us from bondage or social restraints and transformative. Um, to do that, I'm going to be honest with you, I have to really be in tune with myself. Almost something I've heard you say as it relates to trust. I have to trust myself. And in these conversations, show that or prove that I'm trustworthy and trust willing. And that really helps in the breaking down of the barriers in those initial conversations.
Now, do you work predominantly with individuals or do you work with breaking down barriers between groups or communities or organizations? Like, what would the difference be when you're working between groups of people with barriers between groups of people?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I tend to work with individuals and small groups within organizations. One of the things that I've observed that I have to tune into is the resistance to change. And to be honest, at first, I saw that as being a real challenge. But now I see that resistance to change, again, is necessary for the change to happen because it's through that barrier that I can grasp or understand or see the reasons behind their resistance to change. Does that make sense? So, see, when I get behind it, you see the truth of why people are resisting.
So, really, you're going for the root cause.
I am. It's the root cause. But you know what? That can be so challenging because in order to get to the root cause, I have to listen. I mean, not just hear, but listen before I talk. And I think that's what individuals in business, because I teach business, they have to learn to do as well to overcome these pushbacks that they get from employees. They have to listen before they talk. They have to communicate very well. Realize that it's about the employees, and understand that this breaking down barriers happens in stages.
Mhm. Sometimes the barrier is obvious.
Mm.
You can have someone just pushing back and everybody can see it. And then sometimes the barrier is invisible. It could be someone working behind the scenes, pretending to go along with the plan, but they're really being passive aggressive or disruptive in a toxic way.
Yeah.
How do you break down well, before you even get to breaking them down, how do you detect the ones that are a little more invisible?
I've really come to trust my intuition
Mhm.
in my interactions with other people. Um, that seeing behind the door, seeing those individuals that are pushing that aren't in front. A lot of times, if I had a little exposure to them, I could see what's going on. And then I like to have individual conversations with those individuals. And a lot of times that's challenging,
Mhm.
but I try to come from a space that's, what's the word? That's pure and genuine and sincere and vulnerable. And typically, when I'm that way, you get an immediate reaction from people, and it's either towards you or against you. And based on that, I trust it.
We have some listeners who are not on the intuition train. Uh, and speaking to everyone, what would you say instead of using intuition? What can they use to?
So it could be just that gut feeling that individuals have. It could be reading body language. It could be listening closely to what others are saying and to the words that they're saying
Mhm.
as it relates to the organization. Hmm.
All right. Now, you've been doing this work for multiple years, maybe decades. And I don't know, how long have you been doing
Okay.
this work? It's been a decade, less.
It's been about a decade.
Okay. So, how have the barriers changed over time?
Wow. I have to think about the predominance of where we're at today. The world today feels much less stable than it did years ago, more polarized, more volatile, us versus them, and distrust in society, and a lot more intolerance for individuals with different beliefs and backgrounds, more so than it has when I first started. It feels, this may sound odd, but it feels like a switch has been flipped, and
Really?
we have these these structures or boxes that some of society is putting individuals into, and that is causing a lot of the challenges I think that we're having in our world in organizations.
But haven't people been in boxes for a long time? Or what do you mean there?
So I think people have placed themselves or allowed themselves to be placed in boxes for a long time. But the difference is how it's being presented openly
Mhm.
as opposed to the past. And it's that openly taking sides perspective that's causing the challenges. Again, that us versus them. Um, Political tribalism and populism. Those are the challenges that I deal with a lot today, both from individuals and from the small groups that I'm talking with.
Hmm, interesting. Now, earlier you mentioned communication, and that's one of my favorite topics. And from your perspective, how have you used communication to break down barriers, both intrinsically and externally?
Wow, that's powerful. I found that communication barriers typically are rooted in not understanding.
Mm.
So it's interesting. I'm going to go ahead, then I'll come back. I'll have groups that are so challenging that I don't go anywhere. But then when I meet with them individually,
Mhm.
I can't stop them from expressing what's happening. So sometimes the group dynamics prevents individuals from sharing, and sometimes having that individual conversation when they realize that I'm there for them and they feel that and sense that it's genuine, they open up. Um, we have to tap. I have to tap into individuals' intrinsic values. That's the goal for me. If I can tap into that, it improves our communication and opens the door for the opportunity to see things in a new light.
Mm.
And it's that light that over time can bring about change.
So this works with communicating with groups and with individuals, it sounds like.
It does. It may take a little more time with the groups, though, because group dynamics, can be so dispersed and so different. But this is really interesting. A lot of times with groups, the first thing I do is learn names. And in my discussion with the group, I do things, genuine interactions with the group to make them feel comfortable and to know that I'm coming from a space of authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
And I really feel people get that. They feel that. And when they do, it opens the doors for opportunities. So I use that for both groups and individuals. And I know that sounds strange because how can you talk to a group of people and engage them in that way? But it's possible. I've been doing it for a while.
Mm-hmm. What would you say are some of the skills that we need to bring about change? Are they the same ones as in the past? Sorry, not bring about change, but break down barriers to change. Are they the same ones that we used in the past? Or are they more aligned with what you see happening now? What would those skills be?
Hmm. Within organizations, and I typically deal with small business owners, so organizations that typically have less than 200 employees. I feel that the managers, the leaders, have to show their employees that they are seen for their unique contributions.
Mm-hmm.
One of your words, connection.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say connection, I'm going to repeat what you've said and add ease and contribution. So ease meaning respected and treated fairly.
Mm-hmm.
Contribution meaning they make a difference in their outcome. I think that leaders need to show that they're supporting their employees, their work, their career, and then that they are proud of the organization's values and purpose. If they can help employees feel that way, it helps, I think, in what I'm pushing now, and that's that sense of belonging. As opposed to the past where it was much different. Today is much different than anything I've ever seen. Yeah. And I live in California. And um, the willingness of people to share their frustration can be intimidating to a lot of people. But to be honest with you, Yvette, I'm okay with people expressing their frustrations because at least they're expressing something that we could possibly have a conversation about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, ventilation is viable.
Mm-hmm. It is, right? That's the truth.
If you don't let it get out of hand. Yeah.
And that's the challenge, right? Not letting it get out of hand. I was thinking also as it relates to that change, that transformation, that culture of belonging. Um, it involves cohesion and cohesiveness, um, which brings people together. That's pretty deep to me.
Mm-hmm. So, as a final question, uh, I'd like to ask you to share with us one gem you want to leave with everyone, our listeners, so that a gem that will something they can remember easily, so that they can implement it, something practical um, when it comes to breaking down barriers to change, because we all are facing change. We're all in the midst of unprecedented uncertainty and ambiguity. What would you say would be that thing that they should remember?
One word, or can I give
It doesn't have to be, it's just one thought.
Wow. I would say that we have to create a space of trust, a space of vulnerability, a space of empathy.
Mhm.
With those three qualities, we can have great discussions.
All right. You heard it. Ajene, I would love to thank you for such an empowering and interesting interview. Your insights will certainly resonate with our audience in creating a healthy experience when it comes to change. Now, this has been Yvette Bethel with Ajene Wilcoxson, and we would like to thank you for taking the time to join us on Evolve, Reinventing Leadership, Building Freedom Cultures. And with that, I'd like to invite Ajane to tell us where we can contact you if anyone in our audience is interested.
Oh, thank you, Yvette. It's www.potentiality.org. I'm revamping the website now, but it'll be ready next week.
Okay. So thank you, Ajane, once again. And to our listeners, we invite you to join our vibrant network of leaders who are challenging the leadership paradigm at ifbnetwork.co and learn more about our courses at orgsoul.com. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Evolve, Reinventing Leadership, Building Freedom Cultures. Join our vibrant network of leaders who are challenging the leadership paradigm in an innovative learning and impact network. Check out our webpage at ifbnetwork.co to learn more about and join our exciting ecosystem of high-performing leaders.